Good morning again. I think we have set a precedence of finishing our programs a little bit earlier than the allotted time. So that means that we're super efficient thanks to our team who have made the programs very crisp. So thank you, Siddhi. Thank you for running the last segment. And now the next segment is basically interviews with our celebrities and people of, kind of stature in our community. So in this hour, we'll be bringing to you three interviews. The first one is with Mr. Ratan Khosa. Mr. Khosa is actually present right now. I think, Ratanji, have you joined?
Just promoted him.
Okay, thank you so much. Namaskar, Ratanji. Do we have Ratanji?
He is there.
Yeah, he has joined.
He's on mute.
He's on mute. Namaskar, Ratanji.
Can we have a spotlight on Ratanji? Thank you. Namaskar,
Thank you.
Ratanji.
Namaskar, Ratanji.
Namaskar, Bharti. To mute us, Ratanji. Ratanji, to mute us.
Okay,
Thank
now.
you.
Yeah, now.
In your beautiful patio garden, and Bharti ji just moved away.
Yeah, you can see the flowers.
Yeah. Namaskar, both of you. Namaskar. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ratan Khosa. So Ratanji, thank you for attending this segment. We will be bringing your interview with me in a few minutes after we just do a little personal kind of 5 minutes with you. I would like to, for you to speak a little bit before we start the interview. But before that, let me also tell our audience that Ratanji is the recipient of this year's Pinnacle Award from KOA for his very, very generous contributions towards the COVID fund. As you remember that in April we started fundraising for COVID when India was reeling under the effect of COVID. At that time, Ratanji was so generous, and he came forward and he gave us a check of 200,000. That in itself tells a lot about this human being, about the generosity of his heart and whatnot. And along with him, Bharti ji, who has just stepped on the side because I'm told that she's not very comfortable under the camera. But thank you so much, Bharti ji. And so I visited Ratanji about 2 weeks back to personally give him the award because I felt that he deserved much more than that. And so in the process, obviously we learned a lot about Ratanji. As you know, and it's a known, piece of history about Ratanji is that he came to US with less than $4, and despite the challenges, he turned them into opportunities. He, basically has his own company, Cisco. He received MBA from a Booth School of, economics. But at that time, he was also working and he was very busy and his family was very young. And what he told me himself is that it was an extremely difficult time for him. And many times he almost decided that he would go back to India and he would not really make it. And guess who at that time gave him the support? And that was Bharti ji. So eventually, after he graduated from Booth School, he started his own venture at basically the prompting of his father, who told him that, yes, you can do it. You certainly can make it go. And he did. And today he is a very successful businessman. And he has also been a philanthropist all through. He has helped many individuals, and certainly he has actually donated to big time to two universities, University of Chicago and University of Maryland. And I would let Mr. Khosa himself discuss his philanthropic ventures and a little bit about himself. Ratanji, please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, thanks again, Archana, for visiting us
It was my pleasure.
few weeks back. As I said, and folks will listen again, that what I'm today is due to a lot of other people. First of all, Bharti, my parents, employees. So I have been privileged to be what I'm today. And since a lot of folks helped me, I believe it is my turn to help many others who are in need. And again, I wish this online KOA function success. And thank you as a president that you have taken a lot of initiative to move the organization forward. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm to now play the interview and the interview in full in a few minutes. Anilji, if you can start the interview for us. And this was recorded 2 weeks back in Chicago while we were having a nice time at Praveen Rana's house. Praveen Rana ji is our SAC director, and he had graciously invited us over to his home. So thank you, Praveen ji and Anshu, for hosting us that day. And we'll just play the interview in a bit.
Sure, Archana ji. Yeah.
Namaskar. Today is a very special day. Today we are having a very special guest with us, and that is Mr. Ratan Khosa. Mr. Ratan Khosa does not need any introduction. He's known to our community, and he's also known to the community in Chicago. Today it is special because we want to felicitate Mr. Khosa for his contributions to KOA, to the Kashmiri community for years together. So I'm here to give him this Pinnacle Award, which is this year for his contribution for being the major donor for the COVID Relief Fund, which has saved so many lives, and we continue to use that fund towards many programs that will further help the COVID affected families in Jammu and in India. So, Mr. Khosa, thank you so much for your contribution. This is just a small gesture
Thank you very much.
of thanks
For the
from KOA to you, and I hope you like it. And I just wanted to thank you and Bhartiji, of course, for whatever you have been doing for our community.
Well, thank you very much for KOA and your generosity, and this gesture means the bar has been raised, that I got to do more. Thank you.
Yes. It's just a small cue for you, yes. I just wanted to chat, a little bit about you, trying to find, obviously your story, how you came to this country with less than $4 and then struggled for many, many years. Eventually, you founded your own company, that too at, of course, with your parents, your father, basically coaxing you to do it. And now you are a successful entrepreneur. So tell me a little bit about that journey that started, years back.
Well, I had to squeeze many years into a couple of minutes. When I graduated with civil engineering degree and I came back to Srinagar, I was number one out of 125 applicants, and I didn't get the job. And it was a discrimination. It was very hard for me to assimilate emotionally. Then I did work another part of India, so now I'm a majority, but I found that not being from local community, I was discriminated again. So I made a decision that I was going to make my career in the United States. I risked living in a well-off family and came to United States, I secured a research fellowship at University of Maryland, and at that time, India had a foreign exchange crisis, and you could get only $8. So I left with $8 when I left India, and by the time I got to University of Maryland, I had $3.75 on me, and the school was closed for Labor Day, and I thought somebody would be with money for me. It was hard. So I, a month before graduation, state of Maryland canceled the job that I had accepted. So on graduation, I had $60 and no job. I got into this industry that I'm still in with zero experience. I got laid off. First I got promoted, then I got laid off. I got laid off, and then in another company, the same executive who had given me 3 quick promotions fired me one day. Next company, I did, by the way, I did exceptionally well in my job. I made millions for others. I learned a great deal, and when I look forward rather than backward, I focused more on how much I gained and learned rather than crying over what happened to me, that I got laid off, I got fired, laid off. So next job, I rose to become chief operating officer with a salary of $900,000 in today's dollars. But I found the owner was committing a number of frauds, and within 3 weeks, I resigned, and country was at that time in second worst recession, and I had 3 options: find a job, go back to India, or start a company. Couldn't find a job. I was that close to going back to India. Luckily, my father was here, and he convinced me I had it, that I have it, that I can do it. And out of desperation, it was not that I had this brilliant idea that I can start a business. It was purely out of desperation that I started a business in the basement of our house with $44,000, no outside financing, a wife and a 4-year-old and 3 employees, and rest is history.
Wow, that's a success story. But as you just now, told in your own words, it is not easy to be successful. You have to go through challenges and failures and so many hurdles in life. So when people look at success today and they see Mr. Ratan Khosa sitting here, they probably feel that you've always been successful. But through your story, we know that it has not been easy for you.
No.
What will be your message for these youngsters who today think that success should come within years of their, getting in the job market, and they probably are not that equipped to deal with failures? What would your message be
I
to
think
them?
that's a very good question. To start a business, like if IBM and Google had to set up a division, spend $200 million, that's a different story. But to do something like this, what I had to do is like jumping off a cliff, middle of the night, with blindfolded and hoping that there's safety net down below to catch you. And that's very dangerous. And 80% of the companies fail in the first year, and only 1 or 2% go beyond the third year. And I'm glad I didn't know about that at the time. And I had many instances that the business would have collapsed. I did not give up. When I lost my job, I did not stand in the line to collect unemployment insurance. I said, I got to move forward to find a job. I got laid off, I got fired, and then I had to resign because someone else was committing the fraud. And in the business, same thing. I had tremendous hardships. When I started the business in basement, we were going to compete with divisions of 2 multi-billion-dollar companies, and people said, you are nuts, you are crazy. And there are many instances when the company was close to going out of business. At the end of the day, it was the perseverance, working hard, believing in yourself, and of course managing the stress and focusing more on positives than the negatives, and have a faith in yourself. And that's the message I would give our youngsters that have faith in yourself, perseverance, hard work, and the values. Like, for example, ethics are extremely important in my company, and we're known, and I'm glad my son Neil, he's a chief operating officer, he's on the same mold, that we're known for the ethics. So have faith in yourself, hard work, perseverance, and the values, and never, ever, never give up.
That's so wonderful. I think that all the youth who are listening, I think they should actually, go by the book that what you've done. Perseverance, pays. At the end of the day, it does pay. Interestingly, I just had a question about, like, when we were growing up, we had this, almost like a safety net, which, be it parents, be it neighbors, be it relatives, they used to look out for you.
Right.
After migration, unfortunately, we have lost a lot of it. And now we struggle to find good mentors. Um, so what would your advice be in terms of, like, what I'm trying to say is that Kashmiri Pandits are doing remarkably well these days. They are, heading their CEOs, COOs of financial companies, of, IT companies and all that. Um, in my opinion, I think networking is very important in our community. How would you advise us, KOA, or for that matter, any KP community, to develop that networking so that our youth who need advice, mentoring, how would we go about that?
Well, again, a very important aspect of not only business to succeed in general. Before I answer that question, it's kind of awkward to talk about my childhood. When I was growing up, it was all about me. I was great in grades and great in sports, and parents took care of, and I worked by the tail, and I said, I don't need anybody's help. I can do it all by myself. And as the time progressed, and I got discriminated twice in India, I came to this country and struggled. I recall as a student coming from a well-off family, here I am with not enough money. I used to sleep on the floor with hardly half-inch of thick mattress. I bought, I can never remember, forget this, I bought a $17 top coat which was not made of wool. It looked like wool, and one day I was walking, I didn't have a car, I was walking 2 a.m. middle of the night from computer science to my apartment. It was extremely cold, and the wind was going through this coat, and I was shivering as I was walking. And my body became so cold. When I got to my apartment 2:30, I stood under the shower, hot shower, to heat myself.
Wow.
And I had lived through that. So coming from a family where everything was taken care of, and I had worked by the tail, and then having this experience, and then getting laid off, and now I had to start a company, manufacturing company in a basement with no plant, and I had to figure out how to do this. I reached people, and reaching people is networking.
Right.
And I said earlier today at the religious function that if I had to put a mathematical formula, my success is 85% due to other people. For example, when I started the company, I got to make a product and I have no plant. I reached out an individual who I had heard about and never met him. I said, Dick, I need help, and I need you to make product for us. So in networking, when you go to some function or you meet some people, you should never keep in mind that I'm going to go there, or I'm going to meet this person with an intent that he or she is going to help me. You should go and approach, whether it's a function or you're meeting somebody, how I'm going to help them with no expectations. You build a relationship, a camaraderie with that individual, that if you ever need their help, that you can pick the phone and say, Joe, could you help me? And my formula is if I walk on the street and approach 10 people for help, probably 7 people will give me help. I have developed this ability now that I can do it. I have the confidence that I can do it. Walk the street and 10 people, probably 7 will give the help. So no matter what you do, you cannot succeed on your own.
Exactly.
You need help from your employees, from your suppliers, from your customers, and other people. In fact, one engineer lives not much from here, and I'm a structural engineer basically, but I have a limitation. I reach out to him for help. I don't know this. And you have to be honest when you approach people. And I say, I don't know this, that really means I don't even know this.
Yeah.
Please help me. So network is extremely important. So I would give a message when you, very important to network. Don't have expectation that you're going to go to any function or meet people that they are going to help you. You got to approach that you take interest in them and how can I help you. That down the road, if you ever needed help from them, they
They're
will
there
love to
for
help
you. They're there for you. So yeah, I mean, one important aspect of life is that you can never succeed on your own.
That's right.
It takes a village.
Absolutely, yes.
It takes a village for
Yes. For
everyone's
example,
success.
talking about help,
Yeah.
of course, my wife, Bart, is my wife. She's supposed to help me. Absolutely, I couldn't have done what I am today without her help. There were days I would come home and I'd say, my God, while I'm driving, is this business going to survive? And I had a shoulder to fall back upon.
Sure.
I had somebody to talk to who would tell me, tomorrow will be fine, don't worry. Very simple. And I would wait to come home and talk to her, that somebody I can talk to. Apart from what she did at work, she became like a magician, taking care of the home and business and cooking food and taking care of meal and whatnot. And so it starts right from home.
Absolutely. And respecting that is also very important.
Extremely, yes.
Many people
Yes.
probably would not, but
Right.
you are. So it is amazing that you are giving her the credit that she deserves and much more.
Right.
So very thankful for you to do that.
Well, talking with the credit, my parents are not living. Uh, when we grow, we don't give enough credit to our parents. Now that they are not there, many times I feel I couldn't have done without what they did for me. Like my mother prevented me becoming a second-rate cricket player. I thought my life was eating,
She put her
reading,
foot
and
down.
sports.
Yeah.
And my dad, if he was not here, I'm not sure I would have had the courage to start the business that he had the ability and the foresight to convince me that you can do it.
Our families are the cushions that we
Absolutely.
lie on,
Yes.
in times of hardship. Um, Another question I just wanted to kind of know, um, how do you stay grounded with all the success that you've achieved over the years? It's very easy to sometimes get overwhelmed with it and not be the person. Sometimes people lose the perspective, and sometimes we have seen people become different from who they are. So how does Mr. Kosa stay, Mr. Kosa?
I think I have gone through a major change or overhaul. Like I said earlier, when I was a kid, and I said, oh, I'm doing well in sports and studies, and I don't need anyone. And as you heard earlier, as the life progressed, as I went through these hardships and difficult times, and I found out that I'm progressing because of other people's help. And then also in '87, I was in head-on collision. There was hardly any traffic. A security guard coming 6 a.m. in the morning from his shift crossed the green light that I had, and I couldn't believe it. I'm alive. And then the doctor gave me said, sit in the hot tub with muscle relaxer, and I almost drowned in the hot tub. So when you go through that experience and you say, my goodness, I could have gone, I could have taken nothing with me. And I came to realize I have succeeded not totally because of me. I'm just a catalyst to make the things happen. Put the employees together to follow my vision. And when I'm in trouble, I seek help. And I come to conclusion I couldn't do much without great employees, customers. For example, Neil, our son, he's the chief operating officer. He has transformed. I call him Tech Guru. So I look at around me. I'm in the center, and around me, what's going on? They are the ones who are making it happen. Um, and the good thing that happened to me is I came to realize that. If I hadn't realized that, then maybe I'd be arrogant or I would miss what I need to be. And that has grounded me because I was asked a question one time. I was doing a seminar and I said, "What are we afraid of?" Uh, I mean, this is our 40th year. I'm afraid I could fail tomorrow because everything is not up to me.
Right.
So I have come to realize that, uh, you know, everything is happening not only because of me. And should I say I'm fortunate to recognize that, to be grounded, to be humble. And I think there's a great value to be anchored down rather than, you know, the other way around.
One more thing that I noticed, that talking about the employees, putting value. So I'm curious, Mr. Kosa, you have achieved success, and at some point, a person would say, "Well, I've done it all. Let me relax. Let me go and go to the beach, and I've done it all. I've created this business for others, success." How do you evolve yourself in learning more and more? How do you become a learner, someone who stays relevant every day, every month, every year?
So I believe in my book of business, I will never say that I have arrived to number one and that's it. And that's the end of it, and I can relax and sit on the beach, which I love to do, except the sun. So we, right from the beginning, my goal was that M Cisco must be number one in our market, not number two. Number three has no chance. So we are number one. We operate in 15 states. We're number one. In the core market, our market share is 85%. In the total market of 15 states is 65%. Now, things change. When I go back, if I had to go back 30 years, I would never imagine the changes that the industry will go through. And I could never imagine that I could get these ideas down the road to keep M Cisco number one. So I don't sit down regularly on a basis and come up with this idea, okay, now I'm going to do this. It's a constant evolving process. Sometimes I may be under the shower, come up with this idea. At the end of the day, I want to be a step ahead of our competition. How does AmSysco stay number one with customers, with suppliers, with employees? And we do a lot. For example, I'm not strong in technology. If I had to grade myself on technology, I'm probably 0.5 on a scale of 1 to 10. And Neil probably is 11. But I can think about using technology or other sources to keep the company number one. Um, for instance, we have extrusion line. Our first edition ran 95 feet a minute. So in 2007, we sold 10,000 square foot building and we went into 55,000 square foot building and we bought brand new extrusion line, which ran 185 feet a minute. Extruders will last lifetime. There are no moving parts, so long you take care of the machinery. And 4 years ago, I made a decision that we're going to do more CapEx and buy a new extrusion line, which is running 325 feet a minute, 325 feet a minute, that nobody in the industry had at that time. Um, the way we do packaging, no one does like that. I came up with the idea. I did not patent it. I came up with the idea, and it protects the quality of the product. For example, we have the highest quality in the industry. We have unannounced inspections twice a year, and generally we get 99.9. Recently we got 100 out of 100.
That's
not the only
amazing.
time. And we do so many things that other companies are not doing.
Right.
And to be relevant, to stay ahead, it's not a one-day situation or one-year situation. It's a constant thing. While I'm driving, I'm sometimes thinking about ideas. So it's a constant thing that I have come to recognize right from the beginning, that how do we stay ahead of our competition and continue to be number one? It's, for example, our organization flat. We have no quality control inspector. We have no quality assurance inspector. And the way I did it, for example, I myself trained workers, associates, how to produce a quality product. And if we make a mistake, I go in there, I don't point fingers. I say, okay, we did this, and here's how we got to fix it. And we get 100 out of 100. So how do you run a plant without quality control or quality assurance inspector? So it's a constant,
Because
never
you're doing it
stopping,
yourself.
never-ending
Right.
journey, running a business to be relevant every day.
So excellence, being number one,
That's
and
right.
not cutting corners.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
In fact,
not
I-
looking
I,
at the bottom line,
yes.
but the top line.
I owe to my dad. My dad would say that quality pinches in the beginning.
Right.
It costs more. For example, he was a great dresser, and he said, you buy a nice jacket, you spend more money up front, but there are two things. It will last long,
Right.
and you'll feel
And
good
look
when
good.
you wear it. I apply the same principle in the business. We spend more money up front to produce great quality and provide great service to customers.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Are we good? Okay. So continuing our conversation with Mr. Kosa today, I just wanted to ask you that when you're talking about your employees and, how much value and regard you have for them, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who make or break the business. So last year when the COVID hit and there was enough, businesses were losing money, and many businesses actually had to drop their employees. Some people lost jobs and stuff like that. And we talked the other day, and you said that not only did you keep your staff, you also gave them bonus, and you were concerned about the mental health of your employees. Now that was very interesting because being a physician, I've seen in the last 2 years that how much COVID has impacted the mental aspect, mental health of individuals. And I was very impressed that you were already ahead of the curve and you were thinking about the mental health. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. In our company, we have a number of components which go to make the culture of the company. Number one is employee comes first. So in our company, culture is employee comes first, and then the customers, I'm not even second. So along those lines, we had 50% employees in the plant who got positive. And we spent around $150,000 dealing with COVID situation. So the ones who were negative, we had to quarantine them. We paid them salary. There were only 2 people in the office. We could have shut the office, but we decided to do deep cleansing so it will give the comfort and confidence to employees when they come back. When they came back, the whole company, we again paid for fast testing of vaccine. We bought the equipment in the plant. They had to wear mask and a shield. We had to shut the plant, and we could not produce the product to get to our customers. So customers threatened lawsuits. We got letters from their attorneys. And I called them. I said, I'm not going to put employees' life at risk to produce the product. And I stood the ground. I said, if you are going to sue it, we have to face it, but we're not going to do it. Interestingly enough, when first 5 employees came back to work, they worked 12 hours straight, 5 days, and produced the product. Same customer who shouted the most sent an email to Neil one day that we're so impressed with the company. If it was not for COVID, we would fly from Minnesota and take the whole company out for lunch. So instead of that, please buy lunch because we can go out to a restaurant. Please buy lunch and we're going to pay for them. And while this all was going on, me personally, I went through a lot of challenge, emotional challenge, a lot of stress, mental challenge, how to keep the company running while I'm not there.
Right.
And employees are making the product. Sometimes I felt it's selfish. I'm sitting in my home, and Neil was there. Of course, I was worried about him and the employees. Um, Sometimes, obviously, you have to worry a little bit more about. I'm going to be open about it. And I did go to work in July, took precautions, and we always gave preference and we give a lot of attention. How do we keep our employees safe and healthy? And I'm very happy that they went half were positive, that at the end of the day they were all healthy. So as the time progressed, I did a lot of reading. I had to learn on the go. And personally, I feel a lot of challenge due to stress, due to emotional distress, I would say. And I felt the employees must be going through the same. So I had a meeting separately with the office, separately with the plant, and I said, look, I'm going through this challenge. You must be going through the same. It is okay if you're going through the same. So we introduced a policy, unwritten policy. I said, if you want to call your parents, your friends, do that. If you want to see a movie during working time, do that. Our office is by the lake. We own that land. If you want to sit by the lake, there are benches under the tree. Do that for 1 hour, 2 hours. You don't have to send an email to me or Neil. Can I do it? Just do it. Someday, if you don't feel like coming, don't come. Just say I'm not coming, and accept that this can happen. This is happening to me. It can happen to you. And for the plant. And I said, I'm not an expert in meditation, but close your eyes at your seat for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and try not to think about anything. So I try to help them in a way meditation, although I'm not an expert in that field. And then we did this so in different meetings as I was getting these ideas. So for the office, because plant when they're working on the machine, I felt in their brain, their mental on a day will be more into making the product than somebody who's sitting in front of the computer. So for the office, we offered them, we would like you to go to a resort, take a break, go to a resort of your own choosing, take a break, take a vacation, and we're going to pay $350. It's not going to cover everything, but
at least.
so obviously they allowed it. And while I'm talking with the employees, uh, this is not to answer your questions, but this is what the culture as number one employee comes first. We actually share profits with the employees, and we advertise it very aggressively. I have we call not employees, associates. We have an associate in the plant. He has been with the company 20 years. He joined in the plant knowing nothing like I knew nothing in the field. At that time at $6.50, and he is a plant foreman, and he has $220,000 in profit sharing.
Wow.
We have employees 90,000, 150,000,
That's very
110,000.
impressive.
So apart from running the company, servicing the customer, and I feel it will take care of me, one of the things I want to do, I tell employees, I want you to be financially secure. Someday when you're 60 years old, you remember, hey,
Right.
I worked in Cisco and they took care of me.
Excellent.
Yes.
What impresses Mr. Kosa? What personalities in history do you look up to?
Well, I don't look up to as a single personality as such that I could follow. I do a lot of reading, and I compartmentalize something that I read about somebody that I like, that I should follow. It could be John Kennedy, it could be anyone that I'm reading Wall Street. I say, this makes sense. I learned. For example, about COVID, I knew nothing about. Nobody knew nothing about this, so I had to learn by reading and then implementing in the office. So in the work also, in my business field, after I read, I do a lot of reading. I'm so fortunate that Bharti, my wife, she allows me to do all that reading because while I'm reading, I'm not giving attention to her. That I take these segments from whatever I read and educate myself to be better as a human being, as a business person, as a friend.
So you basically take the best out of
Everything.
people
Yes.
and not just follow blindly
Just
a
not
person.
follow one person.
That's really interesting. What makes you laugh?
Well, I am an extrovert, and I like to talk, socialize, and it's funny. When I said, when I was young, it was about me. When I can make somebody happy, when I can make a difference in the lives of other people, which I'm fortunate that I have the privilege that what I got to be, that I'm able to do that.
Right.
That really makes me happy. I may not laugh, I may not have that big, broad smile on my face, but inside my heart, I feel very happy that I can make someone's life better than they had before.
Your best movie? Indian movie or American movie? Tell me one movie that you love.
I love action movies like James Bond. I'm
Wow.
waiting for the next
I
one
love James Bond.
to come out. Yeah.
Oh yeah, James Bond.
And I like war movies because
Oh,
in
wow.
war, in war, there's something common between business and war. In war, there's only one winner. In business, I find there's only
Many.
one winner. You got to be number one. We're number one in our
Very
market. So I like
competitive.
war movies and action movies.
So who's your best Bond actor?
Of course,
Sean Connery.
Yes.
That's mine too.
Yeah.
So we have something in common.
Yes.
It's a pleasure, always a pleasure. When I
Thank you.
talk to you, I
Thank
learn
you.
so much. It humbles me when I talk to you.
Thank
and
you.
I hope that we can learn from your character, from your success, and from the fact that, you have been through struggles and come to this. And I hope that's a lesson for all of us. So this is very well deserved.
Thank you for this
and
award, and
hopefully many
thank you
more.
for this chat.
Many more, and again, it's a blessing for our community to have you with us.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Namaskar.
Ratanji, are you still on? Ratanji, you are on mute.
Yeah. Now I'm, yeah.
We can't. Great. There you are. So
Yeah.
we learned what makes a person successful. The recipe is too long. The recipe is too long. I'm going to read the ingredients. Perseverance, honesty, never giving up, respecting others, staying grounded, never getting complacent, generosity above all, and making friends. You have to keep on making more friends so that you don't actually expect anything, but if you are in trouble and they can come to your help, you don't hesitate asking for their help.
I have to write a book someday.
You do have to. You do write a book for sure. But thank you so much. Thanks again for coming on this segment, and congratulations on the award. You very well deserve that. Thank you so much, and thanks for the generosity.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Ratanji.
Nidhi, it's all yours.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Can we let him, Amitabh in? He is waiting to be promoted to the panelist.
I think he's already panelist now.
Should be in now. Yeah. Okay, I see. Namaskar, Sarni. Now I would like to introduce our distinguished guest and fellow Kashmiri Pandit, Padma Shri, Professor Amitabh Matuji. Amitabh ji is a renowned thinker and author on international relations. He has been awarded Padma Shri for his excellence in education and public life. He has served in prestigious positions as advisor to the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir and member of the National Knowledge Commission as an advisor to the Prime Minister. In 2002, Amitabh ji was appointed as the Vice Chancellor of Jammu University. Currently, he is a professor of disarmament studies at Jawaharlal University and honorary professor of international relations at the University of Melbourne. I can go on and on with the list. Like it's so many achievements and so many awards, but the time, like I have the time restrictions. So I would like to thank you, Amitabh ji, for being here. And I would say that thank you so much for giving us this, for accepting the invite and letting us have some insight of your journey. So you will be hosted, this conversation will be hosted by our own Urvashi, who is married to Anuj Tikku, and she is serving as a professor at Columbia University. Welcome, Dr. Matu. Urvashi, over to you.
I would probably like to take a minute, Amitabh ji. This is Archana here. Thank you so much for coming on this segment. And it is our pleasure and honor to have you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for having me.
It is our pleasure, really. Thank you. And Urvashi ji, are you on?
Oh, she was in, I think. Anil ji, could you please?
I don't think she's on.
Yeah, I see her.
She should be on now. Yeah, she's the panelist now.
Thank you.
Urvashi?
I think I'm on now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you, Nidhi, and thank you, Dr. Matu, for spending some time with us. It's indeed an honor to have you at the KOA Forum. It's a personal privilege for me and an absolute pleasure to be in conversation with you, so welcome again. Let me start at the beginning. I know you spent your formative years in Srinagar, and some of us, a lot of us on the webinar, have that in common with you. You went to school in Burnhall and you were there till the mid 80s. Some of us, some people in the community remember the early 80s and the years leading to early 80s as the good old days when the vast majority of Kashmiris lived in a composite syncretic culture and Kashmiriyat was alive and well. And while some others in the community protest that Kashmiriyat really is a myth, it's a latter-day contrivance of the elite. And so, Dr. Matu, you've written extensively and quite eloquently on this topic. So I'm curious to know your thoughts. What was your experience growing up in Srinagar? And also, now that we have the benefit of hindsight, how do you remember those days? If we could start there and then go on.
Thank you, Professor Urvashi. And let me take 1 minute. Am I audible? Am I clear?
Yes.
Okay. Let me just take 30 seconds to first acknowledge the presence of some people that I know here, and of course the president of the KOA, Archana, and Nidhi Kaulji, who is also the spouse of my childhood friend Sushil Kaulji, and I wish he was here as well because we went to Burnhall School together. I also noticed that Vijay Sazavalji is right in the left-hand corner of my gallery of images, so I want to acknowledge his presence. But more importantly, I want to thank all of you for inviting me to this segment. I am really not a celebrity. I'm just a teacher, and teacher has to be a learner. And I can see Sushil there, so I'm waving to my childhood friend. So this is already.
It's been a long time, yeah. But you're the same. You're the same.
Thank you, Sushil. Very kind of you, and great to catch up.
Good to see you. Talk to you later.
Yeah, yeah. For me, the conversation.
Amitabh, it is good to see you. Namaskar.
Great. Sorry, I won't take more time in trying to acknowledge everyone else, but say what a profound honor it is for me to join the likes of Vijay Sasawal and your previous guest in part of this segment. I'm really a teacher, and I do not say it with any kind of false modesty, because a teacher really is someone who has to be constantly engaged with learning, with students. So in other words, I'm also a learner. So I have come here really to listen as much as to speak. And that's, I hope, going to be the genre of our conversation today. Urvashi, if I may take the liberty of calling you by your first name.
Absolutely. Yes, please.
Yeah, please. Yeah, you asked me this question. You know, I'll not try and be too academic or try and use jargon to describe that experience. And yes, nostalgia can romanticize or can often demonize a period. But let me try and locate myself in that period, in the Kashmir. I was born in 1962. I went initially for a few years to Presentation Convent and then went to Burnhall School. Now, Burnhall was an unusual school, still remains an unusual school, but it was a school run by Irish missionaries. For most of that period, the principal of the school was a priest who came from Ireland. The teachers were mostly Kashmiri Pandits. I think, except for a few who taught Urdu or sports or maybe a couple of other subjects, by and large, they were Kashmiri Pandits or non-Muslims. The class was mixed, and you had Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Christians. We began the day by saying the Lord's Prayer, and the principal, Father Jones, used to conduct this prayer, and everyone, our Father in heaven, and so on and so forth, said it with that same degree of respect and reverence, or irreverence, as you might like to call it, when you're about 12 and 13. But in some ways, you did not notice great differences. You accepted whatever was part of what you thought was schooling or growing up. I think later on, these differences became more crystallized. For instance, clearly in 71, when the India-Pakistan war happened, I think there was obviously the empathy of the Pandits was completely with India, as happened with cricket matches. The empathy of the Kashmiri Pandits was always with India. And you notice that there was a section which identified with Pakistan or with countries who are playing India, and that often created tension and often led to introspection. You recognized, however, that you were a minority, and that minority, however, was one which was extremely tolerant. I keep saying this, and I'll say this again. I can't find an example of any other minority living in such conflict and turbulent conditions, being 100% educated, materially relatively successful. I mean, no one was below the poverty line, tolerant, non-violent, willing to accommodate different traditions and different cultures. So Kashmiri Pandits represented a beacon of light in Kashmir. So I must say that while today I can think of instances where you were often called a dal batta, or where you were ridiculed because you were seen as being not as macho, or that your masculinity was not your foremost trait. But in those days, I did not see these differences as something which was dividing us. Obviously, I think intermarriage and interdining was also less. Intermarriage was almost unknown. Interdining was also less known. But the childhood was idyllic because we rode a cycle. There was no sense of fear. The atmosphere was beautiful. There was hardly any pollution. And you went to school and you came back home and life was simple. There was no internet, there were no mobile phones, there wasn't even a phone. We got our first fridge sometime much later. The first television set came only when the Asian Games came. So you really had to find your own devices to keep yourself entertained. So those days, and I think if you are to ask, and I don't want to subvert this program, but if you were to ask my childhood friend Sushil, I think he'd come up with a similar answer that this childhood was idyllic. But however, I think what was different slightly was that most Kashmiri Pandits saw their future as outside Kashmir. Um, Anyone who they thought that the valley was far too small in some ways to accommodate the aspirations of the Pandits, and any parent who had the means would send their children outside the state to study and get a good education and encourage them to find opportunities within India. So that was a growing trend. So let me not just kind of dilate on this, but I tell you that in a sense, it's not all romantic, but by and large, it was a peaceful, calm childhood, much less stressful than the kind of experiences that my children had to go through in a place like Delhi, for instance.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I when I look back on my childhood in Kashmir, I mean, I went to Presentation Convent, which was like a sister school sort of to Burn Hall, and I remember your principal used to come to our chapel every morning for prayers, and our Sister John, I think, was our principal, and so I do remember passing Burn Hall School every morning, and I agree that they were idyllic. It, to a certain extent, was an idyllic childhood, absolutely. And I also, like, you remember the cricket matches and the processions after the matches. So yeah, it does. When you were talking, it did take me back a while to my childhood as well. I think I agree that we all have shared experiences in that way. So I next wanted to shift gears a little bit. I know that since I have the fortune of having you here, you are among the very, very few people that can bring an academic perspective, expertise in international relations, conflict resolution, as well a policy lens to the issues related to Kashmir, right? And having been born and raised there, and you were just enumerating some of your experiences, your insights, I think, are even more meaningful. So I have to speak to you about one of the most important developments vis-a-vis Kashmir in the recent history, which has been the abrogation of Article 370. And I have like a two-part question. So part one really refers to an interview I believe you gave to Elizabeth Roche in the Mint, for the Mint in 2019. It was, you highlighted two salient points that were interesting to me. One was, and I quote, that the battle for doing away with 370 was easy. The battle for the hearts and minds of people is a larger war to be won. And the second point, which resonated with me personally, was that it's not a real estate issue. It's about the welfare of the people. And that was being compromised by a false sense of autonomy, right? And in fact, you so much as kind of provided a roadmap for the government. And so, Dr. Mattu, I wanted to hear your thoughts. Like, do you still believe that New Delhi is on the right track?
I mean, I think what we need to see is what will happen over the next few months and within this year. I still hold on to that point of view. I don't believe in Manichaeanism, which is a Chinese phrase of looking at life and looking at the world as being divided between God and the devil. The whole idea of conflict resolution is really, as you know, Urvashi, to try and put yourself in the position of the other. Mm-hmm. Why is he acting? If he's acting unreasonably, there must be unless you view it in Hobbesian terms as life being nasty, solitary, short, and brutish. But I have generally a positive view of individuals. I believe that humans are born without any sense of deep evil, and that societies nurture them in a certain way, and that's what creates differences and often contest, competition, and conflict. So, as someone who academically looks at these through the prism of conflict resolution, I often take a more empathetic view, and I can understand that often people who have been victimized and who have been targets of deep suffering cannot take that dispassionate view. To expect a person who has seen deep suffering, or a father or a mother being killed, or a child being kidnapped, to expect him to have the same degree of emotional clinicalness about events in Kashmir is not possible. But I was trained as an academic, and that unfortunately is a burden that I have to bear, or a cross that I have to wear all the time. So I do look at 370 is not really important for me. I mean, 370 is really a restructuring of federal relations. In the United States of America, where most of you belong, after all, there is always a contest between federal and state issues about jurisdiction. I mean, that's why lawyers have a field day in America. So that's in any federal polity. You'll have a contestation about whether it's about gun laws or social issues or any issue, and it will always be competition, and often you'll have the courts adjudicate. In this case, the BJP since 1953 wanted 370 revoked. They got the majority, they revoked it. 370 had lost most of its potency in any case. Most of the laws of the Indian had been applied. However, there were issues like gender empowerment or gender discrimination, which have been done away with. But I genuinely believe that the idea of India is one of accommodation, of pluralism, of diversity. And that's how it's different from the idea of Pakistan, which is built on bigotry, which is built on a narrow view of nationalism, and which what you witness in Afghanistan today is a consequence of this narrow, bigoted, sectarian view of nationalism. And the idea of India is really an idea that you celebrate diversity. You celebrate diversity and you celebrate differences, and you think that you can live and prosper and actually generate hope and optimism and economic growth and opportunities for everyone, even while you celebrate this. This is not a weakness. Diversity is not a weakness. Diversity is a strength. And that's what distinguishes India in some ways. That's the idea of Indian exceptionalism, much more than American exceptionalism, I often argue academically. So in some ways, I think the Kashmiris, how they are mainstreamed into belonging to India is a challenge. Now you could have, there were two clear models. One was give them a sense of autonomy and then they will identify with India, or you integrate the state and then they will initially be forced, but over time organically become part of the mainstream of India. The second experiment is the one which is going on. I think what you need to do is to make the people in Jammu and Kashmir believe that the robustness of Indian democracy, the robustness of Indian civil society, and the robustness of the market economy that has really helped take India to where it is today is going to be witnessed even in Jammu and Kashmir. That is the challenge, to get investment, to get different groups debating issues without ever resorting to violence, even with this integrationist framework. So I believe that it is possible to do so. 370 is really a bogey. It doesn't matter to me in any case. It's a resetting of federal relations. The central government could do it. It's done it. It had actually, it was part of its manifesto for a long time. But I still think that it is possible not only to reclaim that idea of diversity, and really Kashmiriyat for me is something which may have been a political slogan. It doesn't matter what Kashmiriyat means. What really matters is whether Hindus and Muslims can live together. Now, the question is, 150 million Muslims are there in India. There is no other choice but to live together. I agree. There hasn't to be appeasement of any one community. There hasn't to be any favoritism or nepotistic backing of any community. But everyone has to have a stakeholding within this large cake that India represents, or the large cake that Jammu and Kashmir might have, so that they feel that they're part of the system which will provide them with the opportunities which you can lead a good life.
Absolutely. I mean, I got onto 2 points when you were speaking about this. One is that, it's a matter of the reality is shifting, and also a matter of perception that has to shift. And in conflict resolution, perception matters as much as the reality does, as you rightly put. And the other point that I gravitated towards is absolutely, I think diversity is indeed a strength. And to the extent that I believe that it is that secret sauce that keeps India united and democratic, and hopefully, we'll do the same for Jammu and Kashmir as well. So yeah, thank you for your thoughts.
Koushik, can I interrupt you? I thought I'll interrupt you with a 1 minute intervention.
Of course, absolutely.
Yeah, the American dream was initially built on the whole idea of a melting pot.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone who comes to America comes from Ukraine or Europe or different parts of Asia and Africa later, and they kind of shelve their identities and become even changing their names to a more localized version, and they become part of the American dream, and they're all homogenized. But even now, America realized that that melting pot, that soup that they thought they would be able to create, is perhaps less healthy as a way of building a society and building a dream than a salad bowl, which is healthy from every point of view. But also you see that everything that goes into a salad bowl retains that identity, retains that freshness, and yet contributes to a more wholesome, healthy meal. So I think that salad bowl approach of every identity retaining a certain part of their identity, even while being part of a larger dream, is what is important. And America, that's why it's so important to think of America in many ways as a model as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So the other related question I had to 370 is that many in the Kashmiri Pandit community viewed the repeal of Article 370 as a positive development. Now that it's been a couple of years, the initial reactions have settled somewhat. I would love to hear your thoughts on how you see it impacting the community, or what the implications might be for the community in the near term as well as the long run.
I think psychologically, for most of the Kashmiri Pandits, doing away with 370 suggests that, look, India is now claiming its identity in a much more forceful way. Its imprimatur on the valley and in Jammu is going to be greater. And that psychological sense of support is important to a minority community which has been victimized, and in the 90s particularly had to flee the valley when they were faced with extreme violence. And so if that has served as a reassurance, I think there can be no better time for the Kashmiri Pandits now to come back and invest. Invest in living there, invest in building facilities, invest in reclaiming their sites of pilgrimage or their cultural icons, because you will never have a perfect situation. What you have today is that the security situation is in control. I lived in Srinagar last year for about 4 or 5 months, largely as one of the only benefits of the COVID pandemic, because I couldn't move out. But what you can see is that the security situation on the ground has been better than it's ever been since the late 80s, early 90s. What you don't have is a corresponding improvement in infrastructure. The whole idea of creating a Davos-like atmosphere hasn't happened. And that's where a minority which is so professionally successful, which is so adaptable, and which has the capacity to provide leadership, like the Kashmiri Pandits, must invest in the Kashmir that they want to develop in the future. After all, Kashmir is part of the imagination of every Kashmiri Pandit. Here is an opportunity to build a Kashmir of your imagination. Rather than actually look at the state can be only a guarantor of law and order and security. But you have the right to buy property or take it on lease, even if you're not a domicile there, take land, build. Why do you need a state to build a township? If the Kashmiri Pandits Overseas Association were to do it, and as in the famous phrase that if all of us were to work together in one single direction, we wouldn't have lost that cow. That's the old kind of Laldad phrase, that if we act together, work together, and unitedly pull in one direction, it's possible to actually create the conditions for us going back and creating a Kashmir that is of deep value to us. Doesn't mean that everyone has to go and settle there. But if you want to create a Jerusalem in Kashmir, metaphorically, then that's the kind, in a William Blake kind of sense. William Blake wrote this great poem which said that I want to create Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. Similarly, if you want to create Jerusalem in Kashmir's green and pleasant land, here is an opportunity to do so. And here's an opportunity for a forum like Kashmir Overseas Association to actually work, put tangible action on the ground. I promise you, there is an opportunity there. I'm not selling a false dream. There is a window there. I don't know how long this window will remain open, because after all, the greatest stakeholders, if they do not make use of this opportunity, the others will be more reluctant. We belong there. We have our cultural icons there. We have everything that is important to us was there in the valley. It's time we reclaim that.
That's on that optimistic note. I will share. In my optimistic moments, I would definitely agree with you, and I hope that what you just said pans out, and we have the ability to do that. I want to squeeze in a couple more questions. I'm not sure how we're doing time wise. One question I wanted to definitely seek your advice on is, and that's something that a lot of people on this webinar would appreciate, I'm sure, is that what can we, those of us in the diaspora, do to revive and actually preserve our culture?
You know, I think you have to recognize that diaspora, as small as the Kashmiri Pandits, less than 500,000 or maybe even perhaps 1 million at most, can only survive if it preserves its cultural identity, its cultural mores, its practices in some shape or form. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the best way to do it is territorially. You have a physical space where you can actually create those conditions. Mm-hmm. Ideally, begin by even creating a museum or a heritage center of Kashmiri Pandits in the valley. One of the things that's going to be lost is also all the personal papers, all the traditions. I mean, there is a internet or application that's been just developed called Ikwat, which I think tries to record some of that cultural iconography, but it requires much more than that. It requires for all of us collectively to have an oral memory, personal papers, from zatuks to jantris to all sorts of material which we think is, as you as a academic Urushi would know the importance anthropologically of almost a letter that a father wrote to his daughter from Srinagar when she was studying outside in J&K, because it conveys so much and mm-hmm. is so important when you are documenting that history. I think you need to do that as a first step. Create a center of heritage in the valley, ideally, but if not, somewhere else, and digitally, seamlessly connected to a cloud application somewhere, so that even if you don't go physically to that museum, you can at least get access to it through the new possibilities that technology and artificial intelligence offers us.
I think that's that. Thank you. That's a very concrete step that we can actually take. In terms of having a record, if you will, or at least for posterity. Is there something else that we in the US, you see us doing in our day-to-day, our family lives, or, the way that we, interact with our children or the families or more culturally?
Yeah, I experienced this personally because my children are in Australia and one of them is in New York. So they can't speak Kashmiri, for instance. And then there was someone, Radhika Kaul, who an anthropologist, I think, from California, who did these classes, and she learned, but my children learned a bit of, or one of my daughters learned a bit of Kashmiri. I think much more should be done by promoting Kashmiri language, because language is one, if we lose control of our language, I don't know how many in this audience know Kashmiri. So, Richa, agar wo kashir pit ka
Anmara sorry kashir pit
Cha yaad kashir ya no
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल याद क्रांति से याद गुंच याद मंचन पता भूवरी क्या भूवरी पर क्या गए मगर गुंच याद
Brought kun kya gets?
I think this is project Kashmiri language. I think this is the one direct way. Cuisine is going to be preserved because we will enjoy our food and it will be preserved. Our dress is going to be preserved, but language preservation is the most important and most difficult task. Because people lose their languages in a generation. My children have lost it in a generation. I feel that loss deeply because there are some cultural sensibilities that you can never communicate in another language. Can you have a word for kaik in any other language?
No.
Yeah, words like kaik or lol, I don't see any other in any other languages. And I do agree that, you know, language also carries the culture. It's kind of a medium that helps carry forward the culture, and absolutely language is key. And I know there like you mentioned, there have been some attempts, but absolutely. And organizations like KOA can play a major role in that as well. Absolutely, agreed with you.
Just I know you're running out of time, but just
no, it's okay. Please feel free.
I'm going to say that one thing that I do in a small micro sense, it's really micro, is that because our family has a house in Kashmir, and so we're going to set up a writer in residence or we're toying with this from a family trust, and so that people can spend time in residence. And my mother is a writer, and she's becoming older and older, but she's written on Laldet, and she's just produced a book of 4 mystical poets. But so we want some young people to come and spend a couple of months in the summer, conditions permitting, and sit there in relatively idyllic surroundings in Srinagar, and we'll cover the economy from within India, plus all the boarding and lodging within Kashmir, to just for a person to reflect, write, and immerse yourself in a kind of anthropological sense.
That's an amazing idea.
Wonderful.
I'm very happy to work with the KO in seeing if this can.
Thank you. Thank you. That is amazing. I mean, it could be like a summer internship for our, students, so that the younger generation becomes more engaged, involved, and knows about Kashmir Valley and such, because I mean, they have not had an opportunity visit. We remember the valley from our, of course, memories, but they will never be able to know that. And so if this is an opportunity, of course, it would be a great thing for KOA to start the summer internships if we have some resources there, which can, basically would be a safe place for them to stay and then kind of research the valley. That would be wonderful.
Yeah. And I'm also aware of a couple of other, in fact, my aunt, Dr. Matu, you know her. So she also is looking to start a similar scholarship-based program where people can actually go in the valley. So there may be, some connections here that are possible. And I'm delighted that, this conversation led to some of the more practical outcomes. So it is wonderful to hear that.
Formidable intellectual, and Professor Shaktiban. And there's a cousin of mine who runs a DPS school there, who also knows your aunt. So we could use even some of the facilities of the DPS.
Excellent. Excellent idea.
Absolutely.
We'll have to take it offline, Urushi and Amitabh ji.
Absolutely.
Because the one thing, however, I'll suggest to you is that perfection is not something that we can achieve. You can't have a perfect situation where it's going to be suddenly Switzerland and then you can send your children to Lausanne or Bern and Geneva. That's never going to happen. You'll have to live with the imperfect Kashmir or a work in progress. But all I can ensure personally is that whoever comes will make sure that they're comfortable, not in 5-star luxury, but they will have an experience that they will remember positively when they.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
So, while I have you here, and I think we have a few more minutes I can squeeze out, it would be negligent for me not to ask you about the Quad. I know you've been opining on it very recently as the attempt to build a 4-way strategic alliance between India, US, Japan, and Australia, which many international relations experts have labeled as a counter to China. But how do you view the Quad affecting Kashmir? Since we are in a KOA forum, how do you view it affecting Kashmir, and especially in political terms?
I think it's a recognition, most importantly, of India's emerging, growing power status, uh, and the fact that you have these four countries. Usually in international politics, as you would know, Urvashi, you often come together only when there are common interests.
Yes.
But in this case, there are common values as well. Japan, Australia, India, and the United States are all democracies. All of them, except Japan, are also multicultural democracies. And all of them, except Japan, are also federal polities.
Yeah.
There is a lot that they bring to this coalition. Of course, I think the fact that you have a belligerent, aggressive, totalitarian, I could go on using adjectives which are not the most appealing adjectives for China, but that is because I see China as as really a counterpoint to everything that India
stands for. Yeah.
And that's why people who say, "Oh, why can't we act like China?" I said, I hope we never act like China.
Yes.
Yeah. I hope the day doesn't come that we try and mimic China ever, because I think the strength of India is, as I said, this disorderly, chaotic, democratic tradition, which might seem sometimes to be really shabby and soft and not very easy at decision making. And some people get tired, and some of you must have left because you faced all the problems that Indian democracy offers you. But it's getting better. Even as I spend time between Australia and India, and I see that it's easier. I'm talking to you from Jawaharlal Nehru University. I studied here before I went to England. There's no question when my parents had to send someone from my aunt's house if they had to send a message to me. And here I am talking to you on Zoom with a seamless internet connection, sitting with a suit in summer because there's a air conditioner. But I think these are signs of changing times. We are a much more articulate, robust country today. It's a country which I think has huge opportunities. The only thing that India often does is waste its opportunities. And I think there is a critical mass of people in India today who don't want to miss the bus this time. I think far too long we've missed that bus. This is one time that we can't afford to miss the bus, because I don't know when the bus will come again. Here is an opportunity. Let's make the most of it. And along the way, you'll have challenges. You'll have challenges like communal relations. You'll have challenges like what's happening, the greatest humanitarian tragedy in Afghanistan. You'll have challenges within Kashmir. But after all, strong countries, great democracies overcome those challenges and emerge even stronger. I mean, after all, although I know there's a section of the KO which probably was supporting Trump, but I as a liberal supporter, believed in that Trump was far too individualistic and idiosyncratic a figure to be good for any democracy. But in America seems to have overcome the challenge posed by even Trump's right-wing supporters.
Yeah, I mean, on Trump, there was a diversity of opinion. I will admit that. We share different opinions, I guess. But yeah, my husband also is a fan of your work and does believe that the Quad, if it's fully realized, it has the potential to replace even NATO as a premier liberal democratic alliance. Could be a bulwark against authoritarianism. So we will see. We will hope. I think we are just about time. So if you have any closing thoughts, would welcome.
There's some chat function which said, what was your relationship to PDP? And then it quotes an article of mine which says exactly what PDP was. An experiment where I think they were trying to reconcile the interests of Jammu and Kashmir. And I knew Mufti Said for a long time. He asked me when I came back from Australia, can I help him advise him on education primarily. I took that opportunity. Everyone should take an opportunity if you think you can make a difference. Unfortunately, I don't think I made a difference. I don't think I was cut out for politics. Normally, academics have an assumption of their own. There's a certain hubris which comes with academia. You think you are good at doing everything. I was not good at being a politician. Let me admit that. Secondly, about an interview where I said that 370, yes, the security situation is excellent. on the governance and the development front is exactly what I said. We haven't seen the opportunities, but that's why it's important for groups like the KO to come in. We can't always see the state as the great benefactor. After all, America was created by free marketeers. America was created by private individuals who were not looking at the state for doles constantly. That investment, those opportunities have to be taken on by people like us. So, Pavanji, I hope I have answered your questions. I'll be happy to answer. 370, I agree with you, is forgotten. The clock can't be turned back. Vijay Dhar, I don't know whether it's the same Vijay Dhar that I know. Thank you very much for your comments. And again, as I said, it's a deep honor to be here. In all humility, I see, as I grow older and older, I see huge reservoir of strength socially, politically, intellectually from within the Kashmiri Pandit community, and especially, and not only, the diasporic community and the KOA. I think I see you as a way leading in some ways for the future.
Thank you, Amitabh.
Many thanks for your time, Dr. Mattu and everyone else. This has indeed been a privilege. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amitabhji. It has honestly been a pleasure having you. It's a very interesting conversation. Obviously, people have many diverse thoughts on it and, their own commentary on that. It would probably lead to a 3 or 4 hour conversation back and forth, but we unfortunately don't have time. But certainly, it's very insightful. And I would certainly take you up on those, the offer that you have for, opening your home to the internship program. That would indeed be a very important step forward for the cultural interaction and having the youth get introduced to the Kashmiri culture and the roots that we left back home.
Be a great honor and pleasure to work with you, ma'am.
Absolutely. The honor and privilege is all ours. It has really been a pleasure seeing you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Amitabh. Thank you
so
so much.
Thank you.
Our next segment is going to be another interesting topic. And this time we have Vijay Sazawal, who does not need any introduction. We've known Vijayji for many, many years. And he is the founder of IAKF, a political analyst. He's expert on, has worked in the nuclear industry. Currently, however, I know that Vijayji has been very involved personally in the affairs of the valley, especially the Kashmiri Pandits who have either chosen to reside there or have, gone back in terms of their employment or whichever the reason be. He is very passionate about their condition, and I would like Vijayji to start the conversation with Amrita Kaur, particularly on why Kashmiri Pandits living in the valley are extremely important and what should be done for that, for those folks. Thank you, Vijayji. Amrita, are you on? Anilji, is the interview ready to be played?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Namaskar and welcome to this short chat with Dr. Vijay Sazawal. My name is Amrita Kaur. I am the host for tonight, and we are talking to a very renowned and popular community person for the Kashmiri Pandits, Dr. Vijay Sazawal. Dr. Sazawal is a retired nuclear policy analyst who worked in field of nuclear technologies, both public and classified, for the US Department of Energy for 4 decades. He was born and raised in Srinagar, and he came to the United States in the 1970s. He is also a founding member of IAKF, that's Indo-American Kashmiri Forum, Kashmir Forum, and which was a spin-off from Kashmiri Overseas Association, KOA, for its political advocacy for the community in 1991. And since 1991, Dr. Sazawal has been has served for IAKF twice as president, and currently he is the international coordinator for IAKF. Welcome to this chat, Vijayji. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Amritaji.
Vijayji, I have been in touch with you recently and we have talked a bit, and I have been amazed with how much work and with what persistence you have worked for the community and the people of them, stayed in touch with them, especially in Srinagar. So tell me how you got involved in this and your journey since you came here and since you've been involved in this cause.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here. I'm pleased to be in this program. I thank KOA. I thank you. I think we're all doing it for the community. So, but it is interesting. You raised a question about my involvement. Obviously, I've been in this country for 50 plus years. And so first 16 of those years between 1970 and 1986, I really didn't think much about Kashmir other than being a place where you could go and I used to visit there. It used to be a superficial visit in terms of being just a tourist that would come in, be there for a few days, and leave. But in 1986, I got my first awakening when there was actually a communal riot that took place in the Anantnag district when a number of temples and 300 plus homes of Kashmiri Pandits were burned. What shocked me at that time was there was very little public sort of stand on it by the politicians in New Delhi. It was almost like it was nothing happened. And in fact, I led to an exchange with the New York Times, which is actually recorded, written memos both from New York Times and from me to them, which are on my website www.kashmirforum.org. And the bottom line is that is when I first time realized the people in Kashmir are really living on a borrowed time, because there was nobody. Delhi, we had the Congress government of Rajiv Gandhi. There was no investigation done why those riots took place, what led it to it, and so on and so forth. There were political implications of that in the valley itself between the ruling families of Kashmir, but nothing for Kashmiri Pandits. And of course, the next awakening came in 1990, when my own parents who were still living there had to flee. And from there, I obviously started very strongly in advocacy. We started the IAKF, as I said, with KOA's blessings and support, and worked closely with KOA because that's where our community source came from. And the IAKF was the political sort of arm of the KOA, and part of my job was always international. I was corresponding with, which was the most rigorous organization for Kashmiri Pandits at that time outside of the valley, which was Pan Kashmir. And the whole idea at that time was that Kashmiri Pandits are really going to go back. And we thought they will go back. That's the natural affinity of every society in every world. But one of the big learning experiences, so at that time, I didn't really spend a lot of time knowing what was the condition of the people who were still in the valley, because I was thinking everybody's going to go back to the valley. But it was 1996, 1997 when I realized that people were really not the idea of going back was a sort of a cost benefit analysis basis, and it couldn't be rationalized on that basis certainly. And I don't differ with those people for that, but the fact is that there were no takers for going back. And then we had so then I basically thought about this whole issue again, and I realized what is left in the valley is really what we have. Mm-hmm. And it's not really going to grow other than what is there. Now, what I didn't realize at that time was, and this is when I started actually getting involved with the valley people, was what a dismal condition they were living in. And for me, there was a lucky break came in 2005 when I actually became part of the U.S.-India nuclear agreement discussions. And I traveled to New Delhi quite frequently, and I would take a flight basically from New Delhi to Srinagar. And I did that so many times. And of course, I was a sort of a special guest, so I had all kinds of security around me and on me at that time. But I would go out there, meet with people, meet with the community members, visit the temples and all that. And I suddenly realized the community is in a bad shape. And then in 2006, I actually wrote a report. I got that opportunity because Prime Minister Manmohan Singh invited me to a meeting in Delhi. It was December 2006, and I wrote a report on what is the state of Kashmiri Pandits. Again, you can find that report on my website. Really, other than thanking me for the visit, he said we have a committee that is working on it, and actually he did, and I'll come to it a little bit later. But then another visit was taken by Wajat Hobula in 2008, and again he said the same thing. The community is in a dismal shape. In this process, also, I try to interact with the people outside of the valley. This is Kashmiri Pandits, and I really didn't find a lot of sympathy for the people who are living in Kashmir, and that really got me very upset because most people thought, these people had a choice and they decided not to leave. So that's how I said, okay, that my focus is going to be the people in the valley.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are not many people. We were discussing recently that there are not many people left in Srinagar who are Kashmiri Pandits, but who stayed back and who never left. And you said that there were about 1,380 people that are left there. And why is it important that why is it important to focus on KPs in the valley versus everywhere else? Why do you think it's important?
Well, okay, I think that's a good question. I think first you start by saying, what was the number of KPs that actually after the insurgency's worst period, which was between 1989 and 1996, which is when the government, civilian government of Abdullah came back to power. At that time, in 1996, the population of the valley-based Pandits was around 18,000. It was done by all the tahsildars. It was added from there. Then in 2009, when we did the analysis. And I actually paid for a census in 2010, and I can share some of those results with you in this talk. There were about 4,000 left. And today that number is down to, we're estimating about 1,800, 1,500 and 1,800 people. So you can see, first of all, that number has drastically come down and it has not gone up. Now, on the other hand, the government's focus has been on these 6,000 jobs, which really haven't been filled up. And these are all people who will come, live in the government housing, and essentially go back. They don't, from the experience that we have as of today, these people have not really taken the routes in the valley. They basically have automobiles. They come on the weekdays, and at first reason they go back to their homes in Jammu. And most of them have actually built their homes in Jammu and things like that. So you don't see that happening. So you essentially are left with these people. Now, who are these people? For these people basically, had their personal reasons to stay. But when I talk to them at length, in most cases, these people back when they were younger in 1990s, 1992, 93, they basically stayed because two reasons actually. One was the fact they really didn't feel they could live anywhere else. In other words, they didn't think this was their home, and it's like they couldn't dream of themselves being anywhere else because this was their home, this was their land of heritage, this was where their ancestors had been cremated, this is where you celebrate Shraddhs, you do all the events for your deceased parents and grandparents and things like that. This is where your family walked. This is where you met your wife. This is where your kids were born. They just couldn't leave that place. That was one reason. But the second reason was equally important. The second reason was that these people actually were very devoted people. To them, the significance of being close to Kheer Bhavani or to Sharaka Bhagwati and Chakrishwar, or to the temples in Ganpatiyar or Ramchandraji temple in Sutu. These were their sort of their satans. These were essentially, this is what identified them for the community. So what I saw actually was, in a sense, I saw that civilization and culture that had actually, you would always think, here we are 700 years in Islamic rule and in such a minuscule numbers, but we never went down to zero. We never went to zero. We survived 700 years. And those, we talk about Taliban now. I mean, Kashmiri Pandits have lived in a Taliban type environment. If people may not know it, but during the Chak time, during the Afghan time, one of the requirements was that if there is a able-bodied Kashmiri Pandit walking on the street, any Kashmiri Muslim could ask him to lift him on his shoulders and carry him as a one-passenger car. I mean, that was the state of our community, and we didn't leave. We survived because of those civilizational bonds, and as I said, of that family deep connection, rooted connection with Kashmir. But in the process, if you are on the outside, in the process, you realize they were, at the end of the day, the guardians of our culture. And the reason why people don't have difficulty understanding it right now is because they don't understand that this spring of our culture would occasionally have a hiccup, like the Yellowstone, which is marked by our exoduses, and those people would leave and they would replenish the stock in India. So you had enough reservoir in the valley to cause that hiccup for those people to leave, for those people to replenish the culture in India, and you didn't feel like you were missing out anything. But that is gone. That is gone because there is no source anymore left, and there won't be any left if we don't do something about it.
There certainly are very little people, that's for sure. And I wonder if somebody argued that if we have to preserve the culture and community and all the, all that you spoke of, can it not be done outside the valley? Why does it have to be the valley? Why cannot it be at some place that is more politically stable, more safe? Why do you think it's important that there has to be a connection to the land, to our motherland?
Well, I did, as part of my own analysis, I did in 1999 a paper based on data, a new vision for the Kashmiri Pandit community, which is again on my website. It was published by Kosher Samachar, the Delhi KSD news journal, monthly news journal, in March of 2000, in which I basically looked at the places where Kashmiri Pandits had settled in the past. When I say like in Chandni Chowk area during the Mughal period, then in Awadh, which is basically near Lucknow, and Allahabad and all that. And it turns out in most of those places, they also did the same thing that the migrants are doing today, which is they're all staying together. They're all building temples which have the same names as the temples in Kashmir, and so on and forth to go through the rituals. But it happens that within 4 to 5 generations, all you are left with at the end is a surname. Those temples have been long time back given up by Kashmiri Pandits because they had no interest from the progeny to sustain them, and they ended up going to essentially some other Hindu Dharma, Hindu trust, or Hindu organization. Most people leave that area of conclave, and the people who are still there are some Dars in Awadh, there are some Poles in the Sitaram Gully in Chandni Chowk. That's all they have. They have the last names, but there's nothing Kashmiri. So as much as the population today thinks that we got it all together, the fact of the matter is 4 generations from now, it'll be all gone, because it's not something I am sort of projecting. I'm actually basing it on real history and what has happened in the past.
I can see that, because if there is no environment to preserve it, it won't happen, because you are going to have other factors come in which you are living in that would be foreign to you. So coming to that question, I think the related question is also that with the majority of a community that is not the same, does not have exactly the same religion as you, but might be culturally somewhat similar. How do you find the KPs in the valley different from the others elsewhere, the KPs elsewhere?
Well, KPs elsewhere, one of the benefits that they have is obviously they can do they can use their enterprise, and they can go into different jobs and different situations. In the valley, even when we were living in the valley, the choices were very limited. Basically, government was the biggest single employer, and that was, and if you had a job, you had made it. If you didn't have a job, then everything was imperfect, or everything was I think that state continues for these people. So I think this is a two-step process. First, you have to argue that these people staying there really do need to stay there, and they do, because they are doing a job as guardians of our culture, our civilization.
100%.
And once you agree to that, then you decide, well, how can we get them help right now? Now, as it is, I think we're fortunate that at least the government of India right now is thinking about various ways of helping the Kashmiris in general. And I think that will benefit Kashmiri Pandits also, because I already knew that when I went, as I said, in 2000, after 2005, 6 and 7, they were in a bad shape. There were people literally eating their meals at gurdwaras and these the Muslim Muslim places, where they basically the Sufi shrines were located. And it was now today things for them, and I'm talking about, again, see, you have to understand now, we are now into the 30th, 3 decades have passed by. So the generation that essentially I dealt with in the beginning has become parents today. So they are so they ended up being enterprising. A lot of them work for the tourism industries. They work for government jobs, obviously, education department, revenue department, and the like. But they also did real estate, became hot. Kashmiri Pandits used became real estate agents. So the same people, some of the same people who actually were in a bad shape in 2004, 2005, actually doing very well. Now the problem comes to the next generation.
Yes.
You want to hold on to the next generation, which is their children. There is a challenge now.
Yes.
Because here's what, when we did the census, I'll tell you, when we did the census, I did the census in 2010, as I said, for Kashmiri Pandits, we found out here's an interesting statistic. Since 1990, at least 653 marriages had been performed in the valley. 653. 25% took place in Anantnag district, 23% in Srinagar district, 22% in Pulwama, the remaining in the other 7 districts. Now, this is since 1990, 653 marriages were performed. Since 1999, at least 600 births have been reported in the valley. Again, I have the district. So 653 marriages, 600 births, and 277 deaths. So you see, the cycle was actually, it could regenerate itself. In other words, you could come to the next generation. But then the next generation today is fighting for their jobs.
Yes.
So our goal is, the parent is now old, and he has the house, so he doesn't have to worry about the house. But his daughter or son is not doing much.
Yeah.
Now, worst thing is, because they have, some of them overweight, some of them are dependent on government having opened the jobs which have not yet been given out. They have made the promises, and so we're fighting for that also. That's for the adults getting the jobs. For example, government made a commitment in 500 jobs a few years back for the valley people, hasn't come back, but that's a political. So I'm not going to deal in that.
Yeah.
But these people now have children.
Right.
who are in the school going age.
Yes.
So, and their parents in most cases are not employed. But the best thing is that since their grandparents are still there, their houses are still there. And of course, you have to put it on the backdrop of the fact the population is dwindling. And reason is strictly economic. It has nothing to do with, political situation or security situation. It's economic. So they are leaving because they have. So we are trying to say, well, can we help those children at least go through the school there? Can we get help to the parents who are basically in the middle ages? You asked me what are the age groups. They are like 35, 40, 45, that sort of age group are the parents. And so right now, KOA has determined about 17 families have been picked up. Their children are going to school. I have a list of destitute families, and I compared that list there, the KOA's list. It turns out none of the two don't match. So I am at this time looking for finding out the children of these destitute families, with how they are doing and how they. So we are, and again, that's part of the KOA job. I mean, we are rolling everything together in KOA.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think we are, I mean, you made a very great point that for sustenance, it has to be economical. You can't have a person just, we want to have Kashmiri Pandit presence in Valley to hold on to our roots. However, that means also that we will have to give any help that we can to help them sustain themselves, to get educated, to increase the population there in any way possible. And this actually brings to one of the issues that I recently heard from somebody in Srinagar, that it's hard to find a match for matrimony because there are so less number of Kashmiri Pandit people, so it's very hard to do a matchmaking. So it's very difficult that way. And I think as part of a community, as part of KOA and part of IIKF, we are able to probably raise funds, and KOA does have a program for children, which majority has been used in Jammu refugee camp so far, in Jakti and etc. in Jammu. But I think slowly this year and a little bit last year has been gone through to the Valley as well, the Kashmiri Pandits in the Valley. And the program is called Sponsor a Child. It's on Kashmiri Overseas Association website. So if you go to koausa.org and click on donate button, and there's a fund name, and if you select SAC, that is the Sponsor a Child program, it's $275 per year per child, which is not a lot. So you can actually sponsor multiple children and give more funds. Maybe a child needs to, it's very important to get good education, and maybe there might be a possibility that you might get an education, but that's we want to make them more able to sustain in a competitive world. So I think it's very important on our part, and Vijayji, you did make great points about that. And I think cultural importance is one thing, but also sustaining our youngsters there is paramount, and it's something that we need to keep in mind going forward. And I urge everybody here, whoever is watching us, to go to the website on KOAUSA.org and donate. You can donate also on Facebook Live right now. You can donate here, and probably in the comments you can say it is for Sponsor a Child program, or you can just write a check. You can do it through PayPal online on our website. So yeah, I mean, I think this is just something very little that each of us can do to help the children and the youngsters in the Valley to be self-sufficient in the future, and not depend on the government job or not, and they become future entrepreneurs. Any last words, Dr. Sajawal?
Again, I couldn't have said it better. I think for us the challenge is, how do we break this big elephant into small pieces and then make those small pieces workable? I think this is a very important component in that overall jigsaw puzzle as we fit in to save our civilizational roots in the Kashmir Valley, which is to ensure that we have actually children of the parents right now who are there, and the children who are in the school age actually do have the ability and the resources and to stay there and to be able to attend a quality education, which happens now in private school there. And so if we can sponsor such children, I think we'll be sponsoring not only them, but we'll be also helping our own culture save itself for the future. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us, Vijayji. It was a pleasure talking to you, and thanks for taking out time. I know it is getting late and you might have to go out. But again, I want to urge everybody to donate on koausa.org website and select a sponsor a child program and education assistance program if you want to sponsor a child who is, sponsor a person who is going into professional degree. You can mention in your email whether you that you want to particularly help the children in the valley. You can write to president at koausa.org for any questions, or secretary at koausa.org for any queries that you have. And thank you so much. Namaskar, Vijayji.
Namaskar.
Thank you so much, Amrita, and thank you so much, Vijayji.